we go in the archives and look.
You need to make an appointment.
Make an appointment and then tap it. And you probably accidentally leave something, right? Can you go through?
I went on a tour with the Heritage Center. And so I don't know if that happens, and that was adequate for what I remember. People do something. And then, there's just, there are two places to put keywords.
Testing one.
It's all protected, is protected.
Atmosphere, the offices, all that.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Are you getting audio?
If you, that's right, watch the other tools. Just keep
Lining up to pay their dues. In the right age, it's $5. Good enough.
Are you going to introduce him?
I am.
Okay. I'm going to, when that time comes, I'll give you his microphone, and then you're going to hand it off to him.
Okay.
And I'll make him aware of it.
Okay.
The stream is up, and just right here on the screen.
Well, great. Okay, good for you.
That's, you know, that's always like. To get copies. Okay. That would be
So we have this mic. This mic here is for the internet broadcast. Lucy will have it when she introduces you, and she's going to hand it to you. You can just clip it on your appropriate places.
okay.
Just be aware.
Thank you. Yeah, don't let them leave.
I'll probably.
Okay.
This is Chuck Cook with the Friends of Seymour Library. We have about 7 minutes before our program is scheduled to take place. I have a good crowd here in person. We're glad that you are able to enjoy this program from your home or whatever remote location you may be at. If you would, comment in the YouTube comment section if you can. Let me know your experience as far as the video and the audio. That would be very helpful to me in the production of this. But anyway, just a few more minutes and then we'll get our program started. Thank you once again for joining the Friends of Seymour Library here at the Williams Family Seymour Branch Library in Seymour, Tennessee.
Usually makes noise. When it takes, when you go down.
Well, that's good. We don't really. Are you the speaker or is he the speaker?
He's the speaker.
Yeah,
I'm doing tech support.
Okay.
My job's a little easy, so you know. No, some of it was.
The riser is
The riser is, yeah, that was part of the addition of setup here. belonged to the library.
In the street.
Yeah, that was a pretty recent addition and a fantastic one. They're really on screen as well. I'm using mine.
They're full bites and it's.
It took me a while to figure out how to hold that up and move it.
To make it where the wheels don't block.
Sometimes you need to do it.
Yeah.
It's important to be on time. It would
For
be just as
somebody
well.
punctual it is.
It's close. You're doing well. Nice. You can go through there. Mhm. Yeah, through that door. Yes, yes, yes. Go ahead. No, aren't I dumb?
No, I meant to ask you to keep one.
Oh, indeed. Oh, I forgot that and our other program list. So, okay, no. But, I mean, they could still join.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have some paper? Here. This is what I have. There you go. It looks like a crowd of people who really are interested.
That's good.
That's what it looks like to me.
And that tends to be what turned out. These presentations are really nice.
So this part is just about a year old. It was opened in January. And we obviously didn't have so many programs last year.
Right, yeah.
For obvious reasons.
No, it's really nice.
But it's very handy. It's very good. And then it obviously attaches to the library.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. I'm so glad everybody's here. Oh, you want me to be there? Okay, sorry. I just told Mike that I think this is a crowd of people who really care about history. Am I right? Yeah, I thought so. I thought I saw those looks in your eyes. Well, we have the treat tonight to hear somebody who spends all his working days thinking about life 100 years ago and knowing a whole lot about life 100 years ago and is, familiar with its things. So Mike Aday has worked for the Park Service, for 9 or 10 years. He's been here about that time. And he was there when they built this new building 7 years ago or so. Before that, he got to do this in the basement of the visitor center, which wasn't quite as fine. But anyway, I think we're all in for a treat. So welcome, Mike Aday. Now,
thank you all for having me. Just out of curiosity, how many people knew that the Great Smoky Mountain National Park has an archives?
I worked there for 2.5 years.
Oh, you did? Excellent. We'll have to talk later. So for those of you who may not be aware, there is an archive located at Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And it's probably one of the most amazing cultural resource facilities that I know I've ever had the pleasure of working with. Let's see if I can figure out how to advance this. I should have checked this. Hang on, give me just 1 second. I'll just do it this way. So previous to 2016, the archives at Great Smoky Mountain National Park used to be located in the basement at Sugarlands Visitor Center. And I don't know if anyone, you obviously probably were familiar with that. It was not exactly the best conditions for housing all of these wonderful archival records that we have, but it was also just an absolutely terrible place for researchers to come in and do any research. So in 2016, we cut the ribbons on a brand new facility, and it's located in Townsend, Tennessee, and it's the National Park Service Collections Preservation Center. And it's a $4.5 million facility, and it is purpose-built to house the archival records and the museum collection for Great Smoky Mountain National Park. But we also house the museum collections for several other regional national park units. The Andrew Johnson National Historic Site, Cumberland Gap National Historic Park, Obed Wild and Scenic River, and Big South Fork National River and Recreation Area. The majority of the facility, however, is given over to the collections at Great Smoky Mountains National Park. This was a public-private partnership between the National Park Service, the Great Smoky Mountains Heritage Center, who donated the land for the facility, the Friends of the Smokies, and the Great Smoky Mountains Association, who raised the vast majority of the funds for the structure, and then, of course, the National Park Service. So I am not a federal employee. I'm actually employed by the Great Smoky Mountains Association. And between the group that employs me and the Friends of the Smokies, they raised $4.5 million towards the construction of the building. The National Park Service basically oversaw the construction. They were responsible for the design. And then now that we're open, there's myself and one other staff member who is actually a federal employee, and that would be the museum curator. And he is the federal employee of record for the collections. So he's the person who signs loan agreements and gift agreements and things like that. So there are certain things that I'm limited from doing, and they tend to be things that are legal in nature. I work with all the researchers that come into the building, or at least all the researchers that come in to research the archives. But what we house is we house the cultural, archaeological, and archival collections in a really well-designed, purpose-built facility that is just, it's an absolute joy to work in. And I know there are a couple of people here who know what the storage facilities looked like before this unit in Townsend was built. We had storage facilities at Y12 in Oak Ridge, and then at the what was called the Mouse House. And then we also eventually moved those into OSTI, which was the Office of Science and Technological Innovation, I think. I always get that acronym wrong. But it was in Oak Ridge. It was a 3+ hour round trip drive from Gatlinburg. It was completely inaccessible to anyone who wanted to come in and access the cultural collections. And when I say the cultural collections, I mean what most people would consider to be the museum collections. So, you know, the items that were left behind when people were forced to leave the park, the plows and shoe lasts and all these different things like that. Anyone who wanted to come in and research these items had to be willing to go all the way out to Asti, and it was a major undertaking, and the collections got very little use because of that. And it was really difficult even for museum staff to get into. It could be, if there was some sort of a security lockdown, you couldn't get in that day because you were not a DOE employee. And it was really an unpleasant situation to try to work in. But in the Collections Preservation Center now, we have this amazing facility. We have purpose-built and designed storage for all of these artifacts. We have what are called space saver carriages. They're carriages on the shelving is on carriages. You can roll them back and forth. We have a massive amount of storage. It's a 14,000 square foot building, and 90% of it is given over to collection storage. And it's just, it's really a one-of-a-kind building for the National Park Service in this region and for cultural collections as a whole. I came here from Yosemite National Park. I was an archives technician there for a year, and our storage facility was absolutely nothing like what we have now. Before that, I had been an archivist with the city of Dallas and the Dallas Museum of Art and the Dallas Firefighters Museum, and none of these places have anything like what we have here in East Tennessee. And it's just, it's a real pleasure to be able to work in a structure like this. And if anyone here is a member of Friends of the Smokies or the Great Smoky Mountains Association, I want to thank you very much, because your support helps pay my salary, for one thing, and it also helped to fund the construction of this building. And I, again, want to thank you very much. As I mentioned, the archives used to be in the basement of the Sugarlands Visitor Center, and it was terrible. Every time we got more than an inch of rain in Gatlinburg, the basement flooded. And guess what? Every time it rains in Gatlinburg, you get more than an inch of rain. It was unsecure. Visitors coming into the visitor center could just wander downstairs, and you'd often find people poking their heads into offices that had absolutely no business being down there. We had rodent issues and we had insect issues. And the research room where I would set up researchers was very small. We had one table, and you could get, if you were really lucky and the people really liked each other, you could get 4 people at a table. But that didn't happen very often. And if someone came in and they were mobility challenged, they couldn't get down the stairs. We didn't have an elevator or anything like that. So I would have to set people up in the break room upstairs, and they'd have to share space with the bookstore staff and the ranger staff coming in to have their lunch. And that was just awful. The new facility, again, is just fantastic. We've got more of this wonderful rolling stock carriages, and it's amazing. We have room for about 3,500 linear feet of records. And at this point, we have enough space that we can grow our collections for at least another 10 years before we start to have to, maybe consider what kind of space options we need to start looking at. And, we have map storage, and we've got huge maps, plans, and drawings, and it's really nice to be able to have those out and accessible to everyone, including myself. And then we've got this wonderful, bright, airy research room. I can get, I have it set up for 8 people now. You can get 2 people at a table, but we can have more people there. It's just really a wonderful, light, bright, above ground level facility. And I can't speak highly enough about it. So if you come into the archives, what do you think you'll find? A lot of people really don't have any idea what kind of archival holdings the National Park has, but it's very large. We have 1.4 million records in our collection. Documents relating to the purchase of land for the park. As we all know, the park was basically built through the exercise of eminent domain, and in order to make sure that all of the landowners were being, the proper landowners were being dealt with, the parks commissions had to research all of the land holdings in the park all the way back to the original land transactions, so the original grants and things like that. So we have basically an unbroken chain of custody for all of the tracts of land in the park. And for genealogists, that's a huge treasure trove of information. And that's probably about 70% of my research requests are related to genealogy. I work with people who have been doing genealogy for years and they want to come in and dot some I's and cross some T's. And I also work with people who come here on vacation. They might see a name on a tombstone in Cades Cove and they're curious to know who that person is and if they might be a relation to them. So I can sit down and I can provide this information for them to a certain extent. We're not a traditional genealogical repository, so there are some things that I can't help people with, but for the most part, I can at least get people started. We have records from just about every logging company that worked in the park at the time. We have photographs from the logging activities. We have all of the financial documents about how they valued timber in the land, or the timber on the land, all of the land transactions that they were involved in. I mean, it's amazing. People did what they called timber cruises, where they would go through an acre of land and they would count all of the trees in that acre of land, and they would decide what the value of those trees were based on the type of tree. And we have linear feet of records of all of these timber transactions. We have our biggest collection is probably the collection of federal records. We are a federal repository for all the records that Great Smoky Mountain National Park management generates. So if you wanted to come in and research management decisions from the 1930s all the way up to probably about 2015, we have records for almost all of those major decisions. So North Shore Road, the decision to the lease decisions related to Elkmont, all of the various things about the early creation of the park, the construction of campsites, the building of roads. We have all of that information in the collection, and it's volume-wise, it's the largest collection that we have. It has the most detailed, granular information, but it doesn't get as much use as I would like to see it get. Management, staff, they use that collection a lot. I'll have academics that want to come in and they'll want to research how the park decided to handle the North Shore Road situation in North Carolina. So people will come in and look at that. But there's so much more information there that is just really untapped. We have cemetery records for the park. As you know, the park is, I couldn't tell you how many cemeteries exist in the park. They find at least one new cemetery every other year, it seems like. And so we have all of the information about the cemeteries, and that information is very important because the cemeteries that are still open and that people can still be buried in, we need to be able to determine the genealogy of the person who wants to be buried in that cemetery. So we have all that type of information. We also have information on the Civilian Conservation Corps. As you know, they built almost all of the trails in the park. They built the loop over road and both of the visitor centers. And, you know, they were just, had it not been for the Civilian Conservation Corps, most of that park would not exist the way we know it now. So we have records related to the work that they did. We have what are called manuscript collections related to the Civilian Conservation Corps. These are photograph collections, for example, that someone who spent, you know, a year and a half or 2 years in the Corps in the park took photos. And so we have the photos, and we have letters and things like that their families have donated to us. We also have probably the largest collection of Civilian Conservation Corps artwork anywhere in the National Park Service. And it's amazing. Just a real brief history of that. The CCC, the national government sent out artists to most of the CCC camps across the country. And these artists, they were professional artists. Most of them were trained in places like the Chicago University. They were working artists who had lost their jobs during the Depression. And so the government sent them out to document the Civilian Conservation Corps activities in the national parks and national forests and areas like that. And the idea was that these artists would create things like sculptures or large format paintings, and all of these items would be shared in public buildings throughout the country. So if you went to the post office, you might be able to see CCC art, from Yosemite National Park, for example, on the walls in the post office. And once these pieces of art were created, they were all shipped back to Washington and stored in a warehouse. Well, the Smokies, their artists actually worked in the park, and they did pen and ink and pencil sketches of all of these really amazing natural resources that we have. So, they did sketches of wildflowers and animals. They sketched things like Alum Cave. They sketched the works that the Civilian Conservation Corps themselves were building, the roads and the bridges and things like that. And the idea was that these would be kept in the park, and they would be used in future interpretive programming to help promote the national park. And as a result, they all stayed in the park and didn't get shipped to Washington. Well, as everyone knows, the CCC came to a halt when World War II broke out. All of that artwork that was sent to Washington was destroyed. So virtually none of it exists. There are a few pieces that are spread throughout the country, but we have the largest collection of CCC artwork anywhere in the United States. And I didn't know that until I had a researcher who was writing a book about the CCC art program, and she came in to look at what we had, and I was able to pull, hundreds and hundreds of drawings for her. And she was just dumbfounded that all of this art exists and no one knew about it. And it's one of those really wonderful, amazing things, a gem that we have here in East Tennessee that no one else has. Our collections, the earliest item in the archival collection starts in 1780. And that is actually a writ issued by John Sevier when he was, I believe, a general in the Revolutionary Army stationed in North Carolina. And from 1780 all the way up to 2016, the records from 2016 that we have relate to the construction of the building that we house right now. And some of these things are just amazing. I mean, when I opened this box and found this document, I had to do a double take. I had no idea we would have something that went this far back. I mean, this is the American Revolution. This is about the time of the Battle of Grandfather Mountain, I believe. And I'm sorry. Oh, okay. So we have such a huge collection of stuff. This is actually an arrest warrant from the state of Franklin. As you know, as you may be aware, the failed state of Franklin was sort of a 6-month dream of John Sevier that came to an end, and would have been an additional state in the Union had it not been sort of assumed by the United States.
Do you happen to know what this arrest warrant is about?
I have a translation of it, but I didn't bring it with me. But I can actually send you a scan of this, and as well as the translation of it, if you'd like. I'll give you my card here at the end, and you can contact me. We also have a huge collection of historic photographs. We've got about 35,000 images in our historic photograph collection. We have images of early residents, most of the structures that were standing at the time that the park was constructed. We have photographs of those, early park rangers and ranger activities. We have photographs of natural history. Most of those are in black and white, so have never really understood the appeal of a black and white photo of a beautiful wildflower, but we have those. And we have a huge collection of logging images that really sort of speak to the tremendous amount of physical labor that went into logging in the Smokies. And some of these are just fascinating. And then I've got just a sort of a sample of some of the images here. This is a Smoky Mountain Hiking Club at Indian Gap from 1927. We've got about 700 or 800 images that were taken by the Smoky Mountain Hiking Club from their inception in the mid 1920s up until probably early 1940s. And it's amazing to look at these people and think about men and women out there hiking in heavy wool pants and knee-high lace-up boots. Yeah, women in dresses and men in ties out hiking in the backcountry, and it's just kind of baffling. We've got photos of the construction of items in the park. This is the Look Rock Tower over in on the Maryville side of the park. I love this photo. This is the Montvale Cornet Band in Fontana in 1912. I can only imagine that it was just a horrendous cacophony. But I would really like to have seen it. Right. We actually have two online portals. We don't have, the National Park Service doesn't have its own online digital access system. So we have partnered with Clemson University, and they were our first partner, and they have taken 14,000 of our historic images, digitized them, and put them all online. They're all public domain images, so they can all be downloaded. You can download these, print them out, frame them, and put them on your walls. You can email them to your friends and family. If you're doing a presentation of your own, an article or anything like that you're writing, you can download these images and use it for those purposes. And it's really the core 14,000 images that we have, the ones that cover the broadest expanse of history in the park, and the images that are frankly the most fascinating. We share space with about 27 other national park units, as well as South Carolina state parks. You can go on this website and you can be lost for days. It's really amazing. And you'd think that 14,000 images is a lot, but it's one of the smaller collections that's on the website. Harper's Ferry in West Virginia has, I think, something like 280,000 images on their site. We've also worked with...
Are there documents on this website?
There are some. We've got some plat maps, some reports and things like that, but not a tremendous deep dive into land transaction documents and things like that, because it's just not necessarily what most people are going to be interested in. We've also worked with Western Carolina University. They came in several years ago and they took documents and photographs that are specific to the North Carolina side of the park, digitized them, and they're available on their website as well. And there are a lot of documents there. So there are a lot of items from George Massa, Horace Kephart. I think there might be some things from William Holland Thomas there, as well as reports, maps that are pertinent to North Carolina. They can be downloaded as well, but they're all watermarked. So if you wanted something without a watermark, you'd need to contact me and I'd provide you with an unwatermarked copy of it. So not necessarily appropriate for printing or anything like that. But I can provide you with something that's unwatermarked if you're interested. We get a number of donations to the collection. The most recent one that we got was from Carlos Campbell. You may be aware that Carlos Campbell was a member of the Great Smoky Mountains Conservation Association, a very early member. He was a member of the Knoxville Chamber of Commerce. He was also an insurance salesman in Knoxville. And his great grandniece donated 3,500 images to us that were taken over the span of about a year and a half. He was a prolific and very gifted amateur photographer. And so she brought in his cameras, medium format negatives that are in pristine condition, prints for all of them. She also donated the copyright to his wildflower book that was the first wildflower book published about the national park, as well as letters and awards that he won over the course of his life. And Western Carolina University has taken all of the negatives and scanned all of them for us. And sometime in the next year or two, they're going to take a selection of them. I can't imagine they're going to take all 3,500, but they're going to take a selection and put them on their website. So it's just, it's really amazing. And honestly, had it not been for the facility that we built in Townsend, his descendants would not have considered donating these items, because previously they would have not been housed in an appropriate environment. And it's gratifying that people appreciate the work that we do and are willing to give up their family mementos to us. And I picked a couple of things. I looked for a few things in his collection that might be interesting to people in Seymour, and this is the only one that comes up as Seymour, and it just says Seymour. So I said somewhere in Seymour. Okay. And it may, I don't know, does it look that much different around here than it did in 1937? It doesn't seem like it to me. Okay. And I love this image. This is South Knoxville and Henley Street Bridge. And it really doesn't look that much different now. I mean, there's build-up. UT has built all the housing there. And that's a Kern's Bakery delivery wagon driving down the road. I blew that up before I came here so I could see what it was.
And that's the bridge in the very back.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's the Episcopal Church there in the background on the left. You can see the spire a little bit. Methodist Church, I'm sorry. And that was designed by Charles Barber, who also designed the headquarters building in Gatlinburg. And then this is another shot on the bridge. Campbell took photos of Eleanor Roosevelt in 1936 all over the park. She came by herself for a visit and spent about a week in the area. And she went all over the place, basically unescorted. She had, someone driving her around. But she must have really liked the area enough that she came here multiple times, as a matter of fact. And then he took this photo of, I call it Animus on Display in Cades Cove. This is the sign that says, Colonel Chapman, you and host are notified, let the Cove people alone, get out, get gone, 40-mile limit. And this sign is actually on exhibit in the Museum of East Tennessee History. It's part of their permanent exhibit about the creation of the park. And it's just, it's pretty amazing. And then he, of course, took a photo of the Walker sisters. And I don't think I've ever seen any of them smile in any of the photos that we've got, which is, yeah, maybe not. We also have a large collection of oral histories. We've got about 3,500 hours of recorded and transcribed oral histories in the collection. They go back to the late 1930s, early 1940s, and continue off and on up until today. We've had people from North Carolina Decoration Day project documented. UT has come into the park area twice to record previous residents. There was a big Ravensford land swap that we did with the Cherokee, and we swapped land, and they came in and did oral histories with all the people who lived in the Ravensford area at the time the park was established. So we have all of these wonderful oral histories, and they've all been digitized. We got a grant several years ago, and we took all of our oral history recordings to a company in Atlanta, and they recorded all of them, or transferred all of them to digital format. So we have a preservation copy and a use copy, and we don't have like I said earlier, we don't have a publicly accessible digital face. So you can't actually go online and find these and listen to them. But if there was something that you were interested in, you could contact me. I can put the recording on a thumb drive and drop it in the mail, and you can have it. And this is they've all been transcribed. So a lot of times it's much easier to actually read the transcript than to listen to the recording, especially some of the early ones that the equipment maybe wasn't very good, or it's old analog tapes, things like that. So they don't last very long. And so the transcripts are very important.
Are they mainly people who live in the park, or might there be recordings from people outside the park, like in the Seymour area? Or...
It's possible. I need names in order to determine that. Before I came in today, I went to our index, which we still have a 3x5 card index, which has got thousands and thousands of index cards in it. And it's the most valuable tool that I have to find information in the collection. And it probably always will be. So I went and I found one entry for Seymour, and it was basically a letter from David Chapman to someone here in Seymour wanting to know if they were still interested in pledging money for the establishment of the park. And that's the only thing that I found. But you know, if I can look up things by name, and we may have something, so we can I can certainly check on that for you. Just some highlights from the archives. This is something that I'm really proud of. In 2017. Descendants of Elijah Oliver, who was descendant of one of the first white Europeans to move into Cades Cove, donated a couple of leather wallets to the archives. And when I say wallet, it's more like a woman's billfold is now. It was large, and they were made out of leather, and they donated them to us, and they were absolutely chock full of little bitty folded up bits of paper. There were about 175 pieces of paper stuffed into this one wallet, and had no idea what they were. The family had kind of looked through them, but didn't really have any idea themselves. So the first thing I had to do, this paper had been folded up and shoved in this wallet. The last piece of paper went in there in 1905. The first piece of paper went in there in 1840. So they've been in this wallet for that long, yeah. And so what I had to do first was everything had to be humidified. All the paper had to be humidified so that I could flatten it. But before I could humidify it, everything had to be cleaned. So I had brushes and special erasers to get all the pocket grit and all of the dirt and stuff off of the paper. And then I built a humidification chamber out of a plastic tote like you would store sweaters in that had a rubber seal on it. And I took a plastic coated wire frame that you would just put canned goods on in your kitchen, and a piece of unbleached muslin. And I would wet the muslin down, put it in the bottom of the container, put the wire rack in there, and then I would put 3 or 4 pieces of paper on each shelf in the rack, put the lid on it, and then come back every 15 minutes and check and see how much humidity the paper had absorbed. And it needed to be relaxed enough that I could flatten it and not worry about breaking it, but not so relaxed that it would just fall apart. So it took me about 3 months to do this. And I worked on it. I put all my other projects on hold, and I spent 3 months doing this. So every time I would take a piece of paper out, I had to sandwich them in between sheets of blotter paper, put weights on them, and then change the blotter paper out every hour to absorb all that moisture out. And when I was done, we had just this amazing collection of what we call ephemera. Ephemera, those are the little bits of piece of paper, little bits of paper that every day you throw away, like little receipts for things or a note that you wrote. So we had all of this amazing information about the history of life in Cades Cove. So there were records where Elijah Oliver was authorizing the county to pay the school teacher, or where so-and-so would buy, a quarter acre of someone's land. We also had some really interesting things. We had some of the few documents that we have from the Civil War were in these wallets. And they were the good conduct passes that Elijah Oliver had been issued by the Union Provost Marshal that allowed him to leave Cades Cove and conduct business in Knoxville or Maryville or wherever he had to go, as well as the voting attestation forms that he had to present to federal authorities if he wanted to vote, in order to prove that he had been a good supporter of the Union and had not been a member of the Confederate government or the Confederate military. I had never seen anything like this before. And it was just amazing. And like I said, really the only records of the Civil War in Cades Cove that we have. We've also got a collection of records from Yanaguska and the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, some of the only records from that time period that we have, and some of the only Eastern Band of Cherokee Indian records that we've got. We have land transaction records when the Park Service came in and swapped land with them, but in terms of historic documents from the 19th century, these are really some of the only ones that we have, and we got these all from William Holland Thomas's daughter-in-law in the 1930s. We also have a really amazing collection of store ledgers from about 1850 to 1910, 1920. And so, when you'd go to the store at that time, they didn't have cash registers. They'd record all of the transactions in big books, and they would record what you paid or what you owed. If you traded, a dozen eggs for, a pound of flour or whatever it was. And we've got one here from a woman in North Carolina who was a true trailblazer. Her name was Deborah McGee. And she had been married to a farmer in Waynesville, and her husband died. And she was left to run the farm, and she decided to diversify. And she opened up a drummer or a drover's hotel in Waynesville. So whenever they would drive pigs or cattle up the turnpike, they would come and they would stay in her hotel. She also was one of the first women in the state to be licensed by the federal government to sell liquor. There were only 3 other women at that time in the entire state who'd been licensed to do that. Not only did she sell liquor, she also made liquor. People would bring in cherries and peaches and apples, and she would buy their crop, and she would turn around and ferment it and then sell it to the public, because she had a license to do that now. She was one of the first women in North Carolina to be a postmaster. This was after the Civil War. In order to hold a position in the federal government, you had to be able to prove that you had not been a member of the Confederate military or the Confederate government. And men couldn't do that in North Carolina, but women could. And it was an early entry for women into federal government work. And she was one of the first women in North Carolina to have that position. And I was flipping through the the ledger one day and came on this note that says Mrs. Deborah McGee died at Waynesville, and it gives the date and time. And it's just, it was a very poignant moment. So if you want to come in and access the collections, who can? Well, anyone can. Anyone can come in and do research in the archives at Great Smoky Mountains National Park. We're a federal repository, and it is my responsibility to make sure that there are as few impediments as possible between researchers and the information in the building. We hold these records in trust for the American people, and I take that responsibility very seriously. But because I'm the only person in the building that works for the archival collection and the only one that works with the researchers, you have to make an appointment. But we're open Monday through Friday. I'm there 8 to 4:30. I usually try not to schedule research appointments until 9. You know, all you've got to do is give me a call or send me an email, and I'll set up a schedule, you know, set up an appointment for you to come in. I also have gotten really heavily into digitizing records. That was one of the first things we had to pivot to when COVID shut us down. So we invested about $10,000 in new digitizing equipment. And we've got another $40,000 in equipment coming later this year so that I can make as much information accessible to as many people as possible. So it's, you know, it's absolutely not an issue. I just scanned a 400-page transcript from Little River Lumber Company today for somebody. And it took me all of 20 minutes to do it with the equipment that we have. So it's certainly something that I like doing it because it builds our digital repository. It helps to preserve these records because the less these records are handled, the longer they're going to last. So if I can provide someone a digital copy of a record, I'm more than happy to do that. And then that's my contact information right there. Any questions?
How much are you looking forward to the point where the way that you're digitizing something today might not be able to be accessed in the future? And how technology keeps evolving. And, you know, you might have a stack of VHS tapes in your house, but you can't find a VHS player.
I've got a stack of 3.5-inch floppy drives in my office that, you know, I can read them because I went out and bought a drive to read them. But the programs that are on them, they're defunct now, so I can't even open the records. We still have a responsibility to archive those things, and we still have to maintain them because they are federal records. But that is a really big challenge with digital records. Is you've got to continually update your formats, and you've got to stay in step with all of the technological changes. And it's something that, you know, every couple of years it's like, oh, okay, well, I got to upgrade this program, or, you know, I've got to buy a new piece of equipment because the resolution is so much better now. So it's a constant cycle. And that's one of the reasons why a digital repository is such a dangerous thing. I can preserve paper and photographs indefinitely. We have a walk-in freezer where we house all of our negatives. And if we can maintain power to that freezer, those negatives will last 327 years as it stands right now. A digital file, I mean, every time you open a digital file, you lose a little bit of it. It's called bit decay. And eventually it's going to decay to the point where you're not going to be able to open it. So that's the downside of digital versus physical.
Do you still have all the natural history collections too?
Yes, all the natural history stuff is housed at Twin Creek Science Center in Gatlinburg.
Oh, okay.
So all that's out there. Thankfully, I don't have to deal with any of that.
How about all the old furniture and farm equipment and stuff like that?
It's all.
It used to be in the basement of Lufty and get burned. They flooded every year.
It's all in the building in Townsend. So yeah, it's we sleep a lot more soundly at night. Yes, ma'am.
Do people bring you things that you say, oh, that's just junk, I don't need it, or do you accept?
Well, we don't say, oh, that's just junk. But we have what's called a scope of collections, and it's our policy that kind of guides what we can bring into the building. And it's very specific. It has to be related to the national park, the area, or a family that lived in the area. So we allow that to kind of guide us. And we do occasionally get people who will say, you know, I've got this old stack of newspapers from the 1930s. Would you like them? And it's like, well, unless it's, you know, a Gatlinburg paper or something like that, no, thank you, I'm not interested. But what we also do is we try to direct those people to an appropriate repository. And we have good relationships with the Heritage Center and with the East Tennessee Museum, you know, all the other regional repositories. We can generally send somebody there if we think it's a better fit. Yes.
Can you briefly restate or summarize questions so that we're not, they can hear you fine, but they can't hear me.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
You've
Yeah.
done a good job.
Okay, yes, I will. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
In the last 2 or 3 years, there was a news release that the park was going to do research on people of African descent. Do you have any of that? And can you tell us how that's going?
Yeah, the question is about the African American experience in the Smokies project, and that's a project that was started a few years ago to document the otherwise undocumented history of African American existence in the Great Smoky Mountains. And we've uncovered little bits and pieces, and it's like teasing a thread, and you pull on it and something else turns up. And we do have more information now than what we started with, and some of it is really fascinating. We found out that there was an African American family, I believe it was, that worked summers in Elkmont in the 1940s and 50s, and so we've done oral histories with them. We've you know, scanned photographs that they brought in. We have people's experiences from Job Corps in Cherokee. We've also discovered that there were more African Americans that lived in the park before the park's establishment than we'd actually realized. And it's a concerted effort, and it's a shame that we hadn't started this much sooner, because we would have more information. As people grow older and as people die, that information dies with them. But we are making as much headway as we can. Yes, sir.
I read the article that you wrote in the last Smoky's Life magazine about logging.
Oh, yes.
Enjoyable and very well written.
Thank you.
Did you come across anything that would tell you where the logs were cut that were brought out by the Pigeon River Railroad that you would have come through here and out to Knoxville? Is that ringing the bells to you?
So the question is, do we have any information on the logs that were cut and hauled by the Pigeon River Railroad up through Seymour? It doesn't ring a bell, but I think if we've got the information, I can find it. It's just not. There was so much logging. There were so many companies that worked logging in the park. It's difficult for me to keep them all straight without you know, a playbill. But I do not. But I will say I learned something new every single day, which is you know, pretty amazing. And I kind of surprise myself when I'm able to spit something out, but unfortunately this time I can't do that. Yes, ma'am.
One of your line entrance was Ravens Field, and something about the park swapping land with the Indians.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell a little story about that? How did that work out?
That was the Ravensford land swap, and I believe that was in the 1970s. And basically what happened was the if I'm remembering it correctly, the Cherokee wanted some land that was outside the park, but it was bordering the Cherokee Reservation, I believe, or the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians Qualla boundary. And so we basically swapped them some land that was inside the park that belonged to them. I know I'm confusing everything that I'm saying here. I wasn't prepared for that, unfortunately, but I can't. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
This is related to my previous question. I have come across reference to King's Cove perhaps being part of the Underground Railroad. Have you seen anything related to that?
So the question is Cades Cove and its relationship to the Underground Railroad. And I do know that Cades Cove was a stop on the way for Union soldiers who had escaped from Confederate prisons or Confederate imprisonment, and they were shunted up through Cades Cove and brought to Knoxville to the federal forces there. I have also seen allusion to the fact that it was a stop on the Underground Railroad for enslaved people, as well as Tuckaleechee Cove. Now, I haven't found anything in the archives that relates to that. So right now, it's still just sort of there's more speculation than firm knowledge about that right now. But I know that there are some people with the Tennessee State Museum and Archives that have been researching that kind of thing as well. So hopefully their resources will be able to turn up something that will be important to us. Any other questions?